Let's see. How do I check if I'm live? Can you guys can see me? I'm online. Yay. I did it. Guys, I'm not helpless. This is fantastic. We did it, chat. Amazing. I still haven't fixed my desk setup, so I still have to look down at my laptop while I'm streaming, but I'm gonna do it today. I'm gonna fix my monitors and get my desk set up again so that I don't have to work off my laptop and look down like a weirdo while I'm streaming. How are all of you? We did get some questions in the office hours channel in Discord, which is great. So we'll look at those. And also, I know we didn't get a ton of time to discuss it the last time we streamed office hours, but if you folks have questions about the RC, we can talk about that. We can also talk about some of the work that's going on in the RC right now that's exciting. But yeah, maybe we could start with maybe we can start with some of the questions. Against all logic, we actually got a legitimate question from FIWS. Like a legitimate question. Isn't that crazy? It was not a troll. And it was a good question too. So maybe we could talk about that. Let's grab this. And I'll share my screen in a second. Bro, it's not my first real question. Yo, if this is not your first real question, we're gonna have to scroll back pretty far to find your first real question. YouTube stream is unlisted and not public. Okay, hang on. Stream settings. Maybe I want it that way. Does anybody know what buttons I have to click to fix that? Unlisted. Okay, wait. Public. Just like publish it. I think maybe I have to click the publish button. I clicked the publish button, so let me know if that fixes things for you all. Actually, I think I can check. Let me try. Yeah, we should be good now. Okay. Let me share this window. Share. Effect durable something. So the question that was posed, which was a good question, was where is it? Can you explain the relations between effect cluster, effect workflows, CellD, Cloudflare durable objects, and Rivet? Scroll to the right on that. Of course, there's a troll in here. uh, this is for those of you who don't know, the image in the background, if I'm not mistaken, is the Effect Cube site from Kit Langdon, which is fantastic. Honeypot channel, Effect Printer is the Honeypot channel. That's the secret. FIWS, you missed it this morning because Dylan was doing a 24-hour cluster stream this morning. You missed it. What can I say? You really missed out. So anyway, the question is like, how do we untangle all of these things? Can we like talk about how all of this works? Maybe we can start with cluster, and we're going to talk about this at a very high level. And then we could talk about how like effect workflows fits in, and then how the various runtimes fit in. So cluster is a 24-hour cluster stream this morning. Something does not add up here. It was on Dylan's stream. You missed it. What can I say? So effect cluster is a framework for running durable computations on top of effect. It's a cluster sharding solution, so it leverages sharded entities that are the units of work that are responsible for processing messages between different aspects of the cluster. You can almost think of it like it's probably easier to think of effect cluster like an actor framework where the entities are the actors and they send messages between one another and they process their own messages. They can have messages that are durable and persisted. And you can have many of a given entity. So, for example, if you've got like a cluster that's doing, I don't know, maybe it's doing processing email messages. Like maybe there's like an email entity, and that you can have many different email entities that are all pulling messages from that entity's message queue and processing them. You can also have singleton entities, so there's only one of them in a given cluster, which can be really useful for a variety of different things. There you can have crons built into cluster. So a cluster cron is what it's called. I may or may not have just summoned Sebastian from the ether by mentioning cron. Um, and yeah, at its core, cluster is basically an actor framework, but it is more than that in that entities are part of shards, and shards are a logical piece of the cluster. You have n shards in a cluster and n entities per shard, and shards are basically there as a routing optimization, so that if you have millions of entities in a given cluster, like you don't have to maintain routes to every single entity. You can more efficiently route messages using the shard that entity is actually a part of first. Um, and so you can have many different physical machines that are running entities in a given effect cluster. And the whole point is that effect cluster makes the infrastructure sort of transparent. Like you deploy the entities and whatnot to the nodes in question. Um, and then they can communicate just by virtue of that they've become part of the effect that particular cluster. So you can deploy effect cluster onto like Kubernetes, for example. And really at the moment, effect cluster is designed for persistent servers. So it's not really compatible with serverless architecture right now. It's really more designed for what are we talking about cluster? Is this the 24-hour cluster day? It's upon us. Maybe not 24 hours, maybe for a little while. But yeah, we're talking about cluster briefly. Um, so anyway, right now, cluster is really designed for persistent servers. So that's why it's kind of like well suited for Kubernetes deployments right now, where the nodes map to Kubernetes nodes, and then you have entities running within those nodes on different uh, replicas of that particular cluster deployment. Um, and then, and yeah, so like right now, cluster is meant for long running servers. However, um, Tim is doing some work, which we'll talk about maybe a little bit later in office hours, um, to see if we can get cluster to be compatible with a more serverless architecture. And we're using Cloudflare's durable objects as our initial target for this, because we think there's a lot of like primitives that Cloudflare exposes that are nice and can be utilized by cluster. So it's research that's ongoing. It literally just started this particular work stream. So cluster is an actor framework currently designed to be deployed to persistent infrastructure, not serverless infrastructure. But there is a work stream ongoing within the team right now to see if we can get cluster to be more compatible with serverless architecture so we can kind of expand the deployment targets for cluster. So right now we're working on a potential Cloudflare deployment, which we can again talk about a little bit later. But the goal would be that eventually we unlock more serverless targets as well, potentially. Now, effect workflows are totally independent from cluster. So this little like needs question mark arrow thing here is incorrect. It does not, workflows do not need to be run on an effect cluster. To be able to, so effect workflows are an implementation of durable workflows that are effect native. So you build a workflow. Going back to like the email example, maybe you have like an email workflow where you need to do a bunch of things and it needs to be like durable so that if like one step fails, you have to like fail that workflow and rerun it or something. So you build your workflow, and then every idempotent piece of that workflow is described by an activity. So a workflow contains many activities, and you run like those activities as part of like that workflow. Workflows are independent of cluster. Workflows operate using a workflow engine. And currently, the only workflow engine that we have implemented is the cluster workflow engine. So the one that's designed to be run on Effect Cluster. I think we have an in-memory one too, maybe. I can check the API docs workflow engine. What do we have? We have layer memory, and then we have the cluster workflow engine. So to implement Effect workflows, you have to have a workflow engine layer provided so that the workflows have somewhere to run. And right now, we only have a cluster workflow engine. We have an in-memory one too, but that's not really like durable. So the cluster workflow engine is the current target for that. Um, so hopefully at least the separation between cluster and workflow makes sense. To run workflows, you need to implement a workflow engine. The only one that we've implemented by default is a cluster workflow engine that allows Effect workflows to run on Effect Cluster. Cluster is an actor framework that allows you to distribute entities across many nodes and allow them to communicate with one another and also with clients that join the cluster. And all communication is done through message passing. If the separation between cluster and workflow is unclear after that explanation, just let me know. Mattia, damn, I go on vacation for 1 second and we get a 24-hour cluster stream? Yeah, exactly. Um, you can edit it, I think? I don't think I can. I think I have to, like, sign in. Can I edit it? Huh. How do I Oh, yeah. Maybe a dotted line is better here. Effect or cluster workflow engine. So anyway, I would say maybe this is like a dotted line. Dotted. So via cluster workflow engine, you can run Effect workflows on an Effect cluster, but you don't have to like the um, the work that you're running on a cluster does not have to be like a workflow. It does not have to be like a durable workflow. You can run other programs on a cluster if you want to. Does that mean you could replace cluster with any other actor framework to run Effect workflows on top of it? In theory, yes. You just have to implement the workflow engine. So just like, cluster requires the heck's the name of the layer? Cluster runner, I think it's called. Something. Just like cluster requires a layer to make it runnable, workflows also require a layer to make it runnable. So yes, in theory, you could make a workflow engine that allows Effect workflows to run on like, I don't know, temporal or something like that. So yeah, I think that hopefully this is a little more clear now. Now getting more to like maybe we can skip the middle for a second and just talk about Rivet. So Rivet does provide an Effect SDK, but it has nothing to do with cluster or workflows to my knowledge. It allows you to use Rivet via its Effect bindings, but to run stuff on Rivet, but to my knowledge, it has nothing to do with cluster and workflow. So there's like maybe a separation here. How do I make a line? I don't want an arrow. I want a line. Line. Okay, it's still an arrow. We'll just do this. Okay. So like Rivet's over here. It's got an effect SDK, just like Drizzle has an effect SDK that you can use, just like Alchemy, you by default use it through effect. Like these are all third parties that have implemented an effect SDK, but it really has nothing to do with cluster or workflow. So maybe I'll even like delete it from here. Oop, do this like that. Okay. And then we can go like this. Okay. Alchemy is built on top of Effect, and it is an infrastructure as code tool, but it's also more than that. It allows you to also gain access at runtime to the infrastructure that you've provisioned to do things. What exactly is Rivet? Um, I don't know. Let's see what they say on their marketing site. I don't want to characterize them incorrectly. Rivet. They characterize themselves as infrastructure for the agentic era. They run agents, automate workloads, and deploy what they build. So they have an actor primitive. They have a agent OS computer for every agent. They have the ability to run workflows and build dynamic apps, I guess. So, yeah, if you're curious, go to rivet.dev and you can take a look. So anyway, Alchemy, like I said, is an infrastructure as code tool built on Effect, but it's a little bit more than that because you can get access to actual infrastructure that you've provisioned, the bindings to that infrastructure at runtime, in the form of like Effect services. So you can like actually interact with and use that infrastructure to do things. For example, like if you at provisioning time, you could provision an S3 bucket, for example, but then at runtime, you can use that same resource to get access to runtime bindings that you can use to like read and write to set S3 bucket. So we'll call Alchemy up here, IAC. Actually, maybe we'll use Sam's acronym, infrastructure as effects. I still think this is maybe a little less clear, so we'll just leave it as IAC. Oh yeah, I forgot there was an office hours with Rivet. I wasn't on that office hours, I don't think, which is why I don't remember. So hopefully Alchemy is a little more clear now, right? Alchemy is like a deployment tool, but you can also use it to get access to the resources that you've deployed and use those resources in your effect programs. Alchemy can deploy CellD, that's correct. Alchemy can deploy Cloudflare durable objects. Alchemy can deploy a lot of different things. You should check out alchemy.run. Alchemy.run, yeah. If you want to learn more about all the different things that you can deploy with Alchemy. And Sam is building out, and team is building out new stuff all the time, new deployment targets, resources, that type of stuff. Alchemy is so amazing. I agree. I now don't use anything else for like deploying infrastructure. If I can avoid it, I just use Alchemy, and like that's the only thing that I want to use. And their Alchemy, like Sam and Co, are very responsive to feedback as well, which is great. So and plus Alchemy, like it's a totally different like paradigm, right? Like being able to deploy and then use the same infrastructure at runtime is like a very nice experience, in my opinion. So anyway, this is correct. Alchemy can deploy these things. It can deploy lots of things. But the question here, can affect workflows or cluster use CellD and durable objects? So in theory, yes, workflows could use CellD or durable objects. In theory, you would have to build like a custom workflow engine to make that possible right now, because we don't have one by default. Right now, Effect Cluster cannot use CellD and durable objects because these are more like serverless targets, and Cluster is designed for really like persistent infrastructure at the moment. But if we open up the effect repo. So share this tab instead. Yeah. Hopefully you guys can see GitHub now. One of the work streams that Tim is currently working on is seeing if we can get clusters sharding algorithms and basically cluster sharding in general running on Cloudflare durable objects. So this PR is like extremely early, so please do not flood this PR with feedback. Tim is currently very much in research mode. It is just going to create noise if you're all providing feedback in here right now. When we're ready for feedback, we'll let you all know. But there is a work stream ongoing to implement like a Cloudflare integration for cluster. So having like a Cloudflare cluster inside a platform Cloudflare package. So we're very much interested in trying to get this working. So yeah, this is kind of like Tim's focus right now, seeing like how far we can push this to get everything working well. And yeah, like I said, when it's actually ready to test, we'll let you all know. And at that point, I promise, when this is ready to test, um, I promise that I will do a stream with or without Tim, office hours stream, um, working with this stuff, and you guys can watch me like find all the paper cuts with the like implementation. There's a question in Twitch. What do you mean with Cloudflare cluster? Is it using a lot of Cloudflare workers? No, this is an implementation of effect cluster on top of um, Cloudflare, and the target would be durable objects as the like nodes in question. So like um, if you're unfamiliar with effect cluster, this is going to be a little difficult to describe it. Effect cluster is essentially like an actor framework. We talked about this at the beginning of the stream. And it runs entities across many different nodes. Right now, it's designed for persistent infrastructure, but we want to make it compatible with serverless architecture as well. And we have like platform specific deployment targets. So, for example, in our Node.js platform package, there's a Cloudflare. Here, actually, I'll just effect website, share this tab instead. Cluster. So there's like a bun HTTP cluster implementation, which allows you to run an effect cluster on persistent infrastructure using bun as like the runtime. There's a node cluster HTTP, I think, which is the same like um, same effect cluster, but by swapping out like the layer that you're using to run the cluster, you can now run it on like a Node.js node. So our goal with the Cloudflare cluster work that Tim is kind of like exploring here is to allow you to run effect cluster on top of Cloudflare, leveraging durable objects for like representing entities. So how does cluster tie into the machine module by Sandro? I saw Tim ask about a cluster machine. Right now there's no tie-in. Sandro's machine module is right now just a community package. Um, Eventually, we would like to have a state machine module that is very much compatible with and integrated into cluster. But that would be like later work. So, yeah. This work is primarily trying to find out, well, trying to make cluster on top of Cloudflare workers and durable objects where the worker would represent nodes, and like each worker would represent a node in your architecture, I guess, and the durable objects would be entities. So like one entity is one durable object. Cloudflare workflow engine, can we look at that? Again, like, yes, we can look at all of this. You all can also go look at all of this, but I don't want to. This is not the time to provide a ton of feedback on this. This is very much in development, and it's just going to create noise if we spend too much time like giving Tim feedback right now. But the idea here, this Cloudflare workflow engine, is to give. So we have, if we take a step back for a second, in the platform Cloudflare package that Tim has been working on, we have the cluster module, right? Which is a way that you can run effect cluster entities on top of durable objects. And then going back to the diagram that FIWS gave us, so that allows you to run this piece on top of Cloudflare. Oh my God, it's Sebastian. I told you by mentioning cluster cron, he would show up eventually. I told you. Anyway, so the Cloudflare cluster module would allow you to run this piece on top of Cloudflare. And then the Cloudflare workflow engine would allow you to run this piece on top of Cloudflare. So if we go back here, runs durable workflows on a dedicated workflow durable object class. So the idea being that like you can run now you have the ability to run both cluster and workflow on Cloudflare. That's the kind of the goal of like this work stream, this investigation, this experimentation that Tim is working on. Does cluster use the graph module? I mean, people are saying that it's slower than other graph modules, so 99% of users are blocked by how slow Effect's graph module is, Sebastian. That's what the people are saying. So this is the constructor for the Cloudflare workflow engine service. So again, going back to like effect first development, like we always try to implement a generic interface and then have platform specific targets that you can swap in and out with just swapping out like a layer, right? So workflow engine is the generic interface that allows you to run effect workflows. And then we have platform specific targets. Right now, I think there's just really the cluster workflow engine that we talked about that you can run either in Node or Bun. But this constructor creates an instance of the workflow engine service that's backed by durable objects. So let's see what Tim has to say here. In a workflow durable object, the engine operates on the local execution handle, so activities and deferred reads never leave the object. Everywhere else, it resolves the target execution's object with get by name and drives it over the same worker binding. So this kind of makes sense, using durable objects as the like execution, like the computation target. Did I trigger Sebastian? Who the F would dare to say that? Stop. You can't leave it there. It's the fastest graph implementation out there, benchmarked. But is it safe? Are we still on the diagram? Yeah. Sebastian, I want to see benchmarks. I don't know. You should start a Twitter war with other graph authors using your benchmarks. So if we're inside a run, the execution zone handle avoids a self RPC. Every other target resolves to its durable object stub through the namespace binding. So we attempt to get the current execution handle. Oh, man, GitHub. And if we have a handle and the execution ID is the same, we can just return the handle because we're in the workflow stub at that point. Otherwise, I guess we're probably on the worker and we need to resolve the workflow stub. Yeah, trust me, bro, benchmarks are the bread and butter of a Twitter war. That's what we need from you, Sebastian. We need like more Twitter drama. All right. I feel like I'm being baited in Twitch. Wait, Turbofish, are you the same user who popped into chat a while back and mentioned that you had 30 years of experience and had like a controversial question a while back? Controversial. It was just like an honest question. But no. Okay. Well, there was somebody else who had a similar set of questions. I don't remember the question. It was more general. It was more about like just effect in general, I think. And I think it was tagged error handling. Like why is errors as values a good idea? I think is what it came down to. But the question in Twitch is, isn't this all very abstract? Are you sure the industry will like and use effect? I have 30 years of experience and I can't understand anything of what I am seeing. Well, that's fair, but I would say like if you have 30 years of experience, I wouldn't close yourself off to anything, right? Anything new is always going to take a little bit of time to understand. As far as like, will the industry like and use effect? I don't think that's really a question anymore. I mean, we have adoption across many large companies. Cloudflare itself is using effect for some stuff now, and there is a lot of interest in Cloudflare to use it more. Vercel's domains project uses effect up and down the stack for implementing that. Zendesk, there are hundreds of companies. Zendesk uses effect. Open Code's V2 product is written 100% in effect. Guys, give me more examples. My brain's not working this morning. I think the question of whether or not the industry is going to like and use effect is kind of answered. I think it's more now just like a question of how do we help like the agentic experience with effect and improve the documentation as well, which is actually a project that's currently ongoing now that with V4 is in RC phase. We have a project on the team to improve the documentation and try to find ways to make like onboarding yourself to effect easier. I come from Rust and OCaml and don't have problems with errors. Yeah, no, that's fine. I didn't know if you were the same person that had asked me that question. Updating to RC today and excited to move away from beta. What's today's topic? We were talking about cluster. All right, hang on. There's more examples. So human layer also uses effect. Superwall uses effect. Open router uses effect. Yes, our company Effectful uses effect. Warp, the payroll company, uses effect. I mean, there's like tons of examples. Even on our homepage, we have several companies listed. Masterclass, T3 chat. So like all of Theo's projects that especially Julius works on are all using effect because they love it. So yes, in a way, effect is abstract in the sense that when you write a service in effect to do something, you code more to an interface, less to an implementation. And then later on, you provide the implementation that you want. And just that like simple pattern unlocks quite a bit of power because if your code is coding to an interface rather than a concrete implementation, and you get to provide the layers that implement that interface later, it becomes much easier to swap out logic in tests. It becomes much easier to swap out logic when you want to target different runtimes, which is what we're talking about here. And I mean, there's a lot of other power that you get with effect, but for me, I think a lot of people look at the errors as values thing as like being the uh, hook for effect. But for me, the hook for effect was really um, getting to write my programs against interfaces that I developed, as opposed to like the actual concrete implementations. Somebody in Twitch chat saying Rust already has typed errors. Looking at OCaml documentation is the big issue. Is what is said. They don't appear T3 code. Yesterday, the creator of Effect was saying that Rust does not have a powerful enough type system, implying that Effect is stronger, but in TypeScript types are only linting. Currently, I see ads. Please wait for 2 minutes. Just subscribe. And the ads will go away. If you have an unused Prime lying around, easy way to get rid of the ads. I think that I don't want to get into the argument of TypeScript versus like other typed languages. You still like at the end of the day, TypeScript is a compiler. It's not a linting tool. Anyone who says that, I think, hasn't spent enough time looking at TypeScript or using it. It's not linting. It's a compiler, just like anything else. Just like when you compile Rust to run a binary, you compile TypeScript into JavaScript to make it runnable, right? It's a compiler. So leveraging the type system in TypeScript is the same as leveraging the type system in something like Rust. The difference is that in Rust or other typed languages, types exist at runtime, or type information might exist at runtime. Whereas in JavaScript and TypeScript, the types are erased at runtime, right? So there is a difference there, but it's not a TypeScript is not a linting tool. I don't want to spend like a ton of time discussing this because I don't know if this conversation is super useful. But in effect, our goal was to leverage the type system in TypeScript as fully as humanly possible to give developers the confidence to write robust, production grade, and bulletproof applications. Because even though TypeScript is JavaScript with types, and types are great, you can still easily like write programs in TypeScript that are going to first of all devolve into spaghetti, and secondly like become a mess of like patchwork dependencies and whatnot. With Effect, there are a lot of like selling points besides the type system that make Effect very nice for working with like programs in TypeScript. The concurrency aspects, right? Like concurrency is hard to do properly in JavaScript. Effect makes it extremely easy. Um, Error handling, traditionally extremely difficult in types, even in TypeScript, to do properly, because types the error type is not like uh what's it called, surfaced in the type system, whereas Effect uh does surface like errors of the type system at the type level. Yeah, no, I'm Sebastian. I'm not broadly arguing that one type system is better than another. I'm just saying that I don't think that even like I don't think one is better than the other. My point was that um my point was that TypeScript is not a glorified linter. It is a compiler, just like any other. Anyway, getting back to workflow. So this function looks like it tries to grab the workflow stub. So I guess this would be the durable object stub for workflow. Um, this thing looks like it grabs the actual execution handle and would die if you try to do this outside the durable object. And then this interface right here for what we were talking about before, if we go back here, I know I'm showing the diagram still. I'm sorry. Share this tab instead. I just realized it. Um, I know. I know. Relax. I switched. Relax. This this function attempts to grab the execution handle and would die if it's not inside the durable object. And then this method, this part right here is where the actual workflow engine is implemented. So if we go back to the diagram for a moment, when I said here that like to run effect workflows, you must implement workflow engine, right? Maybe we can make this tiny. Oh, Sebastian, you were commenting on Turbofish's sighting of Mike. Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully, Turbofish. My explanation is a little bit is a little more nuanced than maybe the discussion that I don't know what discussion happened on Twitter, but do feel free to keep asking questions. I'm just not 100% sure I'll be able to get to all of them today because I want to talk more about. I want to talk about workflows because chat has been asking me to do this for years. 99% of chat has been asking me to do this for years. So anyway, workflow engine is what you have to implement to be able to run effect workflows. So you describe your workflows, right? As actually, if we go to, there might be workflow. Hold on. Workflow. Hang on. I'll switch my tab in a moment. All right, I'll switch it now. Workflow make. So you use the make constructor to actually build a workflow, and we can look at an example of this in the source code. Effect test unstable workflow. So you describe each of your workflows in the form of using workflow.make. So you give your workflow a name, the payload that it expects to receive, and what it can succeed with, as well as an idempotency key. So this is like kind of like the unique key that's used for making sure that workflows stay idempotent. So it's important that you pass something that's actually unique here. And you get access to the payload here to build this key. Then you would take this workflow and create a layer out of it by implementing like the actual workflow, right? So here these are really simple examples because it's just tests. But the idea is that like you take the workflow, you build it into a layer, and then you provide the workflows to your program, right? And the layer that implements those workflows gets provided to your program, and then you need a workflow engine to run those handlers. So the nice thing here is that the description of the workflow is separate from the implementation, just like we try to do with every other um, framework and effect that has things that are crossing the wire or otherwise. Oh God, I'm not sharing the right tab again. Please don't yell at me. Please don't yell at me. Streaming is hard, guys. Okay. I'm just in the tests. That's all. I'm just looking at the tests here. Oh God. I need I need to implement something where when I'm not on the right screen, chat can like issue a command and it like plays a loud sound in my headphones or something. But I feel like that would be abused, especially by Sebastian, even when unnecessary. So anyway, you describe your workflow, then you implement it as which returns a layer, and then those layers get provided to your program. you can call the workflow by executing it with its payload. So, like, this is the equivalent of, like, having a client that is executing these different workflows. And then, um, if you discard the result of the workflow, you can pull it later to get the result. Um, and so this kind of like again allows you to separate the description of like what your workflow actually looks like, what input it's receiving, what it can return, how it should generate its idempotency key, et cetera, from the actual implementation, which is returning a layer. And then you can swap out the actual engine that you're using depending on where you're running. So let's say like I implemented a bunch of workflows to run on Cloudflare, right? Once we have this Cloudflare integration working. But then I want to test these workflows and I don't want to spin up Cloudflare infrastructure to do it. I could just swap in the layer memory for tests instead of layer Cloudflare. And boom, I'm running my workflows locally in my tests instead of remotely on Cloudflare. This is the benefit of like separating the description from the implementation. Um, yeah. Uh, exclamation point loud sound. But it would only work if you're watching from my Twitch stream. Um, I'm just reading chat to make sure I didn't miss any questions. Heck, that is one big assert with poll results. Like a memory file system. Indeed. Wait, Lloyd, did Sebastian ever review your memory file system PR? If not, let's like go flame him right now. All right. So if we go back to this tab, so implementing a workflow engine is implementing its interface, right? A workflow engine has methods that we have to implement. And this is how we implement this is how the current draft of the workflow engine for Cloudflare is implemented. So if maybe we can, no, he got distracted by graph. I'm not surprised. Sebastian, can you please review this PR? Lloyd put his blood, sweat, and tears into this PR. Don't give him an out, Lloyd. We can't blame David. We can't blame David. Is workflow engine equal to workflow runtime? Like, is the engine for the environment support? Let's see what Tim has to say here. So workflow engine registers the workflow handlers, runs executions, pulls results, resumes suspended runs, executes activities, stores durable deferred results, schedules durable clocks. The workflow instance holds the runtime state for one workflow run, and the in-memory layer is useful for tests. So yeah, I think implementing a workflow engine is what you are asking, Robert, I think. So engine for Cloudflare is an engine for Cloudflare, an engine for Lambda, and yes. So like if you look at workflow engine, so there's the cluster workflow engine, right? And this one is the one I was talking about that allows you to run, like if we go back to the diagram, share this tab. The cluster workflow engine allows you to run workflows with cluster as a target, and then your cluster can be deployed wherever, right? It could be deployed on Kubernetes, it could be deployed on bare metal, it could be deployed whatever. Dylan Raid. Wow. Hello. Hello, all Dylan viewers. How's it going? We are currently talking about effect cluster, effect workflow, and how all the pieces fit together. I know Dylan did a brief look at the PR that Tim is currently working on to introduce cluster and workflow support, effect cluster and effect workflow support for Cloudflare. Super exciting. And we were just looking at like some of the code that's currently being written in that PR, just so that folks can kind of get an idea of how the pieces fit together. But just to what's a cluster? True. What is a cluster? Just to catch the folks from the Dylan raid up, in effect, we have both a cluster sharding framework, also can be thought of as like an actor system framework called Effect Cluster, and it's designed with entities as the unit of computation. Entities are like actors in the actors model, and entities get registered to a shard, which is a logical concept. Shards are used to basically uh, what's the word? Optimize routing of messages around the cluster. And entities can live on any node in the cluster. Um, so yeah, basically an actor system. You can have many entities running in the cluster. And right now, Effect Cluster is primarily designed to run on persistent infrastructure, so persistent servers. But Tim is currently working on this, introducing support for Cloudflare, which would kind of unlock the ability for us to run Effect Cluster on serverless platforms. Um, and then we also, in effect, have implemented an implementation of durable workflows, which we call Effect Workflows. And Effect Workflows are separate from cluster, but they can run on Effect. If you have an Effect cluster running, you can use that infrastructure to run your workflows using because we have an implementation of the workflow engine that is specific for cluster. But in the work that Tim is doing right now, if we flip back to this tab, Tim is currently working on introducing both a cluster implementation for Cloudflare, which would allow you to run Effect clusters on top of Cloudflare workers and durable objects, where the workers are the nodes and the durable objects are the entities. And then he's also working on implementing support for Cloudflare, like having a workflow engine specific for Cloudflare. So you can run your Effect workflows on top of Cloudflare durable objects. Um, so let me answer some of the questions from. I wish you all the best, but Effect will fail. Not even you are able to give a simple explanation of what a cluster is. Many levels of abstraction will lead to a clusterfuck. Wow. Okay. I'm sorry that you feel that way. Have a good rest of your day. Jesus. Um, I will also say it will fail and go back to eating my Cheetos and being a consumer. uh, um, there were questions in YouTube. Cluster is more about distributing workflows among a cluster of instances. You can use a cluster to run workflows as like on the entities of that cluster. Yeah, so you could have like an AWS Lambda cluster, an AWS EC2 cluster, a Cloudflare durable object cluster. Exactly. How would you migrate from one workflow engine to another? For example, from the cluster workflow engine to the Cloudflare workflow engine without losing uptime? Don't know if we have a story for that quite yet. Right now, this is the exploration that we're doing is just about getting things running on Cloudflare. But I don't think we have a story around like migrating between runtimes quite yet. Can you combine multiple clusters across different providers? I'm not sure. I assume yes, because you could have one cluster register a client entity into the other cluster. So like having a um, having like cluster A register a client inside cluster B and vice versa, and then they'd be able to communicate with one another. But Why use clustering instead of parallelogramization? Indeed. Indeed. Max, I really agree naming is hard to grasp with workflow. I I mean, if you have better names, let us know, but I feel like, uh, yeah, if there's better names out there that you folks have that you wanna suggest, let us know, but, I mean, the cluster is about running a cluster, workflows is about running workflows. They're 2 separate things. Workflows can run on a cluster, like durable workflows can run on a cluster, but they don't have to. Cluster monomorphization. Turbofish, I thought you were leaving. You're welcome to stay. I'm about to clust. Um, I know it's a hard problem. Yeah, I mean, again, everything the 2 hardest things in computing, naming things and uh, caching, right? Like, 2 hardest things in computer science. Is effect similar to Rust? Uh, there are parallels that one could draw, but no. I do find that, in r for Rust programmers, like, particularly those who are familiar with, like, asynchronous Rust, like, folks coming from Tokyo or other asynchronous Rust runtimes, I do find that they grasp effect much faster because there are, parallels that one can draw, for example, between, like, asynchronous tasks in Rust and fibers in effect. Um, the error handling model's, like, similar in some respects. So, like, my experience has been that Rust developers tend to grasp effect much faster, but I wouldn't say that it's like a effect is like Rust for TypeScript, it's not. How about cluster service map tag? Cache and validation, thank you. Yeah, naming things and cache and validation, 2 hardest things. I feel like every naming of effect modules and features has 2 phases. Number 1, "What the fuck? They named it like this? It makes no sense." And then 2, "Oh, they were right." I think I'll go even further. It starts before that, right? It starts, like, a year or 2 before that, where the person goes on Twitter and does, like, what Turbofish did and tells us that effect is gonna fail and it's terrible and why would you ever do this and blah, 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 blah. And then, like, a year later, they'll post again and say, like, I can sort of, like, see, like, why people like effect." And then, like, a year later, they're totally effect filled. It happened with the Primogen, also, where always been, like, very negative on effect, didn't really like it, didn't understand it, never wanted to give it a try, and then, like, very recently, posted something saying, like, "Okay, I see, like, why people like effect," or something like that. So haters are gonna hate, haters gonna hate, and that's fine. It was um, the first time that effect ever went viral was like I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, maybe more, and it was awful for the for the mental for like the mental. It was just awful. People were very not nice. Uh, and then it was a very different story a few years later when Effect went viral again, but, like, the first time was rough. I'm not a hater, I actually came here hoping to I didn't say you were a hater. I didn't say you were a hater. But I see that not even you understand what Effect is. Okay. I've been a core contributor to Effect for, uh, almost 6 years, but you're right, I probably don't understand Effect very well. Explain it like I am 5 years old. It is a effect system written in TypeScript. That is it. If you're familiar with effect systems from other languages, then that should make sense. If you're unfamiliar with effect systems from other languages, then, you know, I don't know. It is an effect system written in TypeScript. Anyway, but yeah, if you have better suggestions for naming, it would be great to hear your guys' suggestions. Um, because you're right that naming things is hard and like, you know, having cluster and work. I think in effect v3, what was confusing is cluster and workflow, if I'm not mistaken, were tied together originally in v3. And at some point in v4, we like explicitly made them separate so that you could run workflows independent from cluster. But Dylan, effect make TypeScript good. TypeScript hard to make good. Effect make good TypeScript easy. Can I like how do I pin this? Pin this message. There you go. Perfect summary, Dylan. What's a TypeScript? Indeed. What is a TypeScript? Uh, I am trying to scroll backwards in YouTube chat to find additional questions. I'm sorry. I dream of using effect in production. The learning curve is too high for my offshore team at the moment. I mean, that's fine. I would say if they have access to like agents, um, the barrier for learning anything new has never been lower. Let's put it that way. Um, Mike pulls, yeah, the final step in naming things in effect. Mike pulls rank as the BDFL and everybody just accepts it. Exactly. Exactly. I have seen quite a few IOTS and FPTS projects where the one that introduced them left and got me super hesitant to try effect despite I liked the problem that is solved, really gave a chance. Well, we're very committed to maintaining effect for the long term, so um I hear Mike once say that those who don't I heard Mike once say that those who don't understand effect usually haven't faced the problems complicated enough to need the solutions it provides. Um, yes, but I don't think that's 100% true because I think that um the individual in chat, Turbofish, if they have 30 years of experience, like they've clearly faced these problems, right? Like I think that the questions are being asked in good faith. Uh so like I think that that it's somewhat true for younger developers who may have never faced the problems that affect solves. But I think Turbofish, if you have 30 years of experience, then you've clearly faced these problems in production before. So I don't think that that would apply to that. Like I don't think that logic applies in this scenario. Let's put it that way. I think these questions are like 30 years is a lot, but I am young. Yeah, but 30 years is 30 years, right? Like Mike has 15 years of experience in the industry, right? I have what year is it? 7. This was not my first career, so try to educate myself. Listen, also the V4 documentation is coming. We ported the V3 documentation to V4 so that there was something for folks to look at, but Effect V4 is going to be we're in release candidate phase right now, so I would definitely encourage looking at that. But there are going to be better docs coming, which will hopefully help as well. And I also definitely encourage if you want to like learn about Effect, one of the ways that I approach learning anything new nowadays is like, especially if it's like an open source library. Like I wanted to learn more about FoldKit when it first came out, before we had Devin on office hours. And so I cloned it and launched my agent inside it and started asking it questions. And I find that very effective. I don't know if other folks find that effective, but I do think that it's fun to like um, work with your agent to learn new things too. Not just like delegate to your agent, but actually like learn new things from the agent. To be fair, some of the concepts are hard to understand, but the ones I get are super helpful and promising. I agree. I think that the problems are some of the things in effect are hard to understand, but that's because some of the problems we're trying to tackle are difficult, and sometimes abstracting too far can lead you into a different set of problems. What world? What world did you guys come from? Scala, Zio, TypeScript, Elixir. I think it's a mix on the team. I have pretty much my background is in DevOps, but I've always been like a uh, my programming background is primarily in TypeScript. I've done some Rust work and I've done some work in lower level languages. And I'm familiar. I know how to like read Scala and Zio, but I've never like written a Scala project. All right, back to the YouTube chat. There's a lot of questions here. I'm sorry. I kind of got used. I kind of got used to the workflow and cluster naming. You guys are still talking about these names. Yield is a new concept. Yeah, yield is yield. But again, with yield, with the generators and yield, like for me, like if you map that mentally to async await, I feel like it's just not that hard of a leap, right? Like function star, yield star, async await. It's like it's the same, right? Ooh, good call, Ion. Turbofish, if you haven't looked at Effect Institute from Kit, um, he did a good job. The problem is he hasn't released new lessons in a while. I don't think I'm not sure that I'm not sure if new lessons will be released, but Effect Institute is a good resource. Kit did a nice job. Sebastian, why are you saying I'm on the wrong screen? I'm not talking about anything. You're looking at Cloudflare. Yeah, I'm not talking about any code. See, I told you if I gave Sebastian the ability to ping me, I told you it was just going to create noise. He's pinging me in Discord saying I'm on the wrong screen. This is why we can't give Sebastian any power. With great trust comes great responsibility. Or with great responsibility comes what's the quote? We can't the long story short is we can't give Sebastian like too much access. Otherwise, in my opinion, a big hurdle in adopting Effect is not the learning curve itself, but rather how do you structure the files, etc., in your project so that using Effect makes sense. With great power comes great responsibility. Thank you, Orlin the Mage. My brain is not working today. Also, you have ketchup on your forehead. I do not have ketchup on my forehead. Um, yeah, I think that for the project structure thing, it's one of those things where Effect isn't really a framework in that sense, where file structure and how you organize your project is dictated to you. It's more of like a programming toolkit. So you can structure your project how you want. And like while I acknowledge that the flexibility is like really nice, I also like acknowledge that a lot of folks want a dogmatic project structure or like more advice on like how to structure modules and things like that. Yes, where's your forehead ketchup? I think we can probably do a little bit better, and in the V4 docs that are currently under development. Maybe we can put in some more information about like structuring modules, structuring your application around services, designing around layers, that sort of thing. Just wait till the dev team learns about the pay per yield. Exactly. Anyway, how does cell D fit into the picture? I'm sorry, FIWS, we didn't answer your last question. Uh, I see cell D as a deployment target, right? So if you're running cell D somewhere, you could have a workflow engine or a cluster or both that you could deploy to your cell D cluster. Like you could run effect cluster on top of cell D if there was um, a cluster runner implemented for it, or if you have a workflow engine implemented for cell D, you could run it there. I'm not sure if the Cloudflare workflow engine that Tim is working on will be like compatible with cell D, but we can test that out once the work is a little more fleshed out. What would be the best reference repository? I don't think there's like a best reference. There are a lot of references out there that you can look at for how different people structure their projects, right? You could look at like the open code repository, for example, which is fully written in effect. Um, they have some interesting patterns that they use in their project. You could look at T3 code, which is open source, also fully written in effect. Um, and see how like Julius and Theo structure their services. You could look, yeah, Lloyd says you could look at his project Stack Effect. There's a lot of projects out there. Um, you could look at our Discord bot project, which is a little bit of a smaller scope, um, like effect application. So there's projects out there. It's just that like effect is not a framework. It's a more of a programming toolkit, right? It's so uh you, the structure of your project is not doesn't matter to us. It's like you can structure your project however makes the most sense to you. Yeah, I wouldn't look at Slop Cop FIWS because it is slop at the moment. Like I've been vibing. That project is very much an experiment to see how far I could get with purely vibe coding with effect. And I shouldn't say it's slop. The project actually is like the agent actually does a pretty good job at structuring things in that project. And especially with like using alchemy to deploy and like I have found that agents perform exceptionally well with FoldKit as their front end framework. Um, but maybe that's just because I'm a little FoldKit pilled. Um, but like between the FoldKit MCP and like the ability for agents to invoke commands through the MCP in your application and like get the deterministic output, I've found that like they do really, really, really well. But Slop Cop, 100% official effect conventions. Gotcha. Exactly. Sebastian says, but effect should grow up to become more frameworky and offer full stack abstractions. I agree with you. I just don't think we're 100% there yet. I think once V4 is out and stable, that'll be a good time to start thinking about how we could offer more frameworky solutions, more dogmatic patterns around like structuring your application and whatnot. I think the only real like dogmatic convention or pattern that I would say exists is the service pattern in effect, where you structure your application around effect services. So like everything is a service, and then your main application is just like the main function of your app is just a composition of layers, the things that the layers that construct those services. Um, but yeah. Domain-driven design plus hexagonal architecture is the easiest to grasp with effect from what I've tried. Yeah, I mean, again, whatever works the best for folks is fine. I think, like, right now, we don't dictate a, particular file structure or architecture for your app. Um, so again, maybe we can go back to the workflow engine, the Cloudflare workflow engine, and just look, at one of these methods that Tim is implementing. So, like, registering a workflow, um, so you get the workflow definition and the execute method, I guess. And Tim is capturing the current context of the effect app here, creating this workflow registration thingy object, registering it. What does this do? We'll have to look at what workflow registry is. And then adding a finalizer to the scope here to unregister the workflow. Modular monoliths are a super popular architecture right now. Effect is great at building modular monoliths. Okay. Hey all. Here comes homie again. Hey all, 99% of enterprise use cases for Effect are currently blocked on the latest MCP support. Please move V4 to stable, so you work on what matters most to the community. We won't be mad if you do breaking changes. Yeah, true. Lloyd has been working very hard on the latest MCP protocol support, for the MCP server. There's an open PR right here, actually, that Lloyd has been working on. Where is it? Here. Hello? Okay. Um, yeah, there's still, like, some feedback that needs to be addressed. Tim needs to do another review, of the PR and everything, so, um but Lloyd has been really doing the Lord's work here, the Lloyd's work, trying to get, like, our MCP server to parity with the reference implementation, so kudos to Lloyd. This has been some really good work. 99%. Press X to down on the breaking changes. Being okay. Yeah. It's so hard to synchronize to help you all, to know what's being said in the other chat. So hopefully it makes sense, what I'm saying. Streaming is hard. Dylan, I don't know how you do this every day. One of the other things, taking a step back from cluster and workflow, since I can't explain it very well. My bad, to all of you who, I can't explain it well to. One of the other PRs in here that I think is really interesting that you all should keep an eye on is this work by Julio. So, this has nothing to do with us disliking Fast Check. I think Fast Check is an amazing, library. This has more to do. Keep an eye on. Keep an eye on. Said by Ion. This PR is basically trying to introduce a native arbitrary module for effect that plays very nicely with schema, and is purpose built to run like in like effect with schema. So we're able to do optimizations that are like designed for effect to speed things up. So if you look at this PR for Julio, he did a bunch of like benchmarking on like arbitrary generation with different methods and whatnot, and was able to get a pretty significant speed up, across the board here. This PR is definitely still a work in progress, but native arbitrary support is coming to effect potentially, in the near future, so it should be pretty cool. We can even take a look at like some of the code here. If I look at tests, where are you? Let's take a look. So like using it with schema would be just creating an arbitrary from a schema and then sampling the arbitrary. You know what's also really fast? The graph module. Sebastian, until it's on Twitter and a feud has been started with like David or somebody, it's not going to make it. Good, I was blocked by non-native arbitraries. 99% of effect users were actually blocked by non-native arbitraries. Fun fact. The other reason why Julio's been putting this work in is because we didn't want to be locked into fast check versioning or fast check bundle size. So by implementing our own arbitrary, we were able to keep ourselves independent from those things. It also erases another one of the very few dependencies that Effect actually has. So keep an eye on this PR. I'm really excited about this work that Julio's been doing. It's been really interesting to watch. And it really doesn't even add like a tremendous amount of overhead when running. I mean, you'd be usually doing this in tests. So my first okay, this is coming from Twitch, Mr. Benjamin. My first impression of FoldKit was that it didn't lean into services as opposed to resources as much as I'd hoped. Did you have the same concern initially? If so, has your perspective changed? Um, I think that uh, with the Elm architecture, like with the architecture that FoldKit chose, the Elm architecture, it doesn't lend itself perfectly to the service pattern for like specifically the message part. However, I do think you can leverage services very easily in FoldKit um, the same way you would in other applications. For example, like when your application initializes and you're constructing like flags. So for those who are not familiar with FoldKit, let me just pull it up. Let me do it in a different tab so I don't lose PRs. The PRs tab, FoldKit, and share this tab. So FoldKit is a front-end framework built on Effect that is allows you to basically program in the Elm architecture. And it's centered around models, messages, update, and view. Like these four things are kind of the core concept. You build a model for your application. You create messages that allow you to make changes to that model. The update function that you define takes in a model and a message and allows you to return a new model, as well as potentially a list of commands to run. Commands are like side effects, right? So you update your model and you may also have some side effects to run. And then you translate that model into a view, right? So all pure functions, which is pretty cool. When you're starting up your application, you define like an init function, and the init may depend on some like flags that you have to compute. For example, like loading from local storage or fetching some information from some server somewhere. I don't know, but like this is one place where like you can leverage services really easily. Like in the Slopcop app that I'm building or that I was building. Uh, flags depends on like a few services, or at least it did when I was working on it, like hand coding. I know, like a caveman. But you can leverage services pretty easily from like when you're building the initialization flags for your app, and then you can still use services in commands, right? So like, uh, I don't know, let's say your command here, when you actually execute this command, this effect depends on, I don't know, some service that you've defined. Um, you can provide that service to the root of your application the same as you would with a normal effect app when you define your runtime here. Where is the thing? Actually, let me just pull up Slop Cup or effect TS. So if we look at apps, web, source, main, not this one. I need my entry point. You can see here that I have like this layer that I'm building, the app layer, which defines the local storage implementation I want to use, as well as gives my app an API client to communicate with the Cloudflare worker I'm running. And then I basically just pass that in here as resources. The one thing that I've been talking to Devin about is like it would be nice if you did not have to have the distinction between resources and managed resources, and like just lean into like the layer terminology. Um, but overall, I think FoldKit leans very nice. Like it's the for me, it feels like a very nice uh, bridge between allowing you to like write the logic of your app in effect, and connect that to like the whole model message update view cycle. Because most of like like the model message update view cycle, that part is all synchronous. You're not going to be writing effectful logic in that part of your app. You would be writing the effectful logic as side effects that happen in commands. So like the things that can happen as part of like updating. Um, so yeah, I think this is a really nice way of writing front end with like while leveraging effect, and the tooling that your agent gets access to with FoldKit is also like fantastic. Like if you have the MCP server installed, which is as simple as like in an open code JSON file, for example, this is all it takes to enable the FoldKit MCP. Once you do this, your agent has the ability to like while your application's running locally, if it needs to invoke your app to do debugging and like see how like running different commands affects the application's state, it can do all of that just by invoking the MCP, and the MCP can communicate with FoldKit's dev tools to literally run commands against the running application and watch the state changes of the model over time. It's it. I think it's fantastic for agentic development. I really think Devin's doing an amazing job here. You're laughing? 99% of effect users were blocked by non-native arbitraries, and you're laughing? I know, I'm a monster. I'm a monster. Let me check if there were other questions that came through the office hours channel in Discord. There was a question about a distributed lock package that Ethan has written. Yeah, I think without a reproduction, or I'm not sure. Any other questions or comments? We've been going for about an hour and a half. Sorry. Mike is saying that given that FIWS asked an actually legitimate question in Discord today, it's now we're ban worthy. It's very suspicious. I agree. FoldKit feels great, but I'm not sure about making the leap from solid 2.0 to it. I mean, I'm not advising anybody to leave their front end framework of choice. I'm just saying that my experience with FoldKit has been exceptionally positive thus far. Is there going to be a platform Cloudflare package? Well, what we showed before, the work that Tim is doing here. Let's go back. The cluster, the runner implementation for the cluster runner implementation for Cloudflare, as well as the workflow engine implementation for Cloudflare, would both be would both be like the first things, modules, whatever, exported by a platform Cloudflare package. Um, so it's called Alchemy. No, yes, there are. I think there are some things that need to exist outside of alchemy, but and this would be one of them. So like uh, there, these things would be like kind of like the first things that would be part of a platform Cloudflare package when we get to the point that we're actually thinking about releasing this. Browser worker plus Atom RPC question. FIWS, thanks for talking about cluster. You are welcome, my friend. And one day you shall get your cluster office hours where we actually look at code. Some feedback for FoldKit is probably to improve the type inference. Right now I have to declare the types everywhere. I think yes, I think that's sort of by design at the moment, but I agree that there could potentially be a better UX around like not having to define so many types. But I don't know. I think that FoldKit is still super early. Let's be very clear about that. I'm not recommending anybody move off of their front end framework of choice and use FoldKit or anything like that. But if you have a toy project and you want to like play around with it, I think it's definitely worth looking into. And I think it's going to become a very robust. My prediction is that FoldKit uh, will become a very nice and robust way to write effect apps for the front end. But that doesn't mean we're like abandoning Atom or anything like that. I think Atom is a great reactivity framework for effect. The question about distributed lock isn't really about the port itself. It's more about whether I should build the broader toolkit as a separate library or aim for a PR to the effect repo from the start. I think things like this should probably start as a community package. And if they're found to be like that's usual that in the past, especially that's how it used to start, right? Um, I remember when I first started contributing to Effect, I used to build like packages, and then Mike and I would like talk about them for a while, and eventually we would decide whether or not if it was reasonable to elect that code into the main repository. Um, but I think like for stuff like this, it probably makes more sense as a community package, at least to start out with. Any other questions, folks? Questions, comments, concerns? I don't know, Turbofish, if you're still here in Twitch, but if so, is there any other resources or things like that that we could recommend to help you get started on your effect journey or to help clarify things? Are there any, like, are you a particular type of learner, visual, like, prefer to read docs, prefer to get your hands dirty and like write code? Just let us know. Also, I don't know if Turbofish, I don't know if you're still here, but the Effect Discord is also a really good place to hang out if you have questions. Oh yeah, the browser worker and Atom RPC question. I'm sorry, Lloyd. This will probably be the last thing we talk about because it's um, been a little bit. I'm gonna read Lloyd's comment and then we can look at code. I have an office hours code review, but I might not be able to. I've reached for the first time the platform browser worker module, and I've been piecing it together with RPC and Atom RPC to parallelize some expensive work on the client. Structure looks something like you build atoms, which use Atom RPC. You have your hooks, which use the atoms, and then you have workers, which define an RPC group, and it's exposed over the worker runner. Okay. It would be very helpful to get your opinions on how I've structured the web worker atom. Oh, let me see. Let me see if I can pull up this code. So this is how the web worker is defined. Okay. Still no commands. Sorry. I haven't put that much effort into my Twitch stream, but I probably should. I really should. Sorry. So I guess this is just all the schemas for the RPC group needs, and then I'm assuming this RPC group is exposed over the worker. Recipe builder.worker.ts. This one. Wasn't Zyverge working on an e-learning platform about effect, or was it podcast videos talking about it? They have a workshop that they're running. Definitely check out the workshop. Educational materials workshop. I think it's John is one of the best educators I've ever had the pleasure of learning something from. So if you have the opportunity to go to his workshop on effect, I can't recommend it any more than like it's not possible for me to recommend it more than I possibly like. Go. He is such a good educator. I remember several years ago, this is 4 or 5 years ago now, at Zio World, I went to like a Scala workshop that he did for like Zio stuff. And I didn't even write stuff in Scala or Zio back then. But I learned so much just like by going to listen to his workshop. He's a fantastic educator. Don't miss the workshop if you have a chance to go. Yeah, this looks super clean, Lloyd. You got your handlers for your RPC here. You have your worker that you're building with the browser worker runner. Yeah, so this thing is the thing that actually runs the worker. This is correct. How the main thread consumes it in an atom. Recipe builder atom. Let's go look. Recipe builder client, Atom RPC, layer protocol worker. Okay. I think this looks pretty idiomatic and reasonable. I don't like this all looks pretty idiomatic effect atom code. I don't know that I've seen this particular pattern yet, but it's pretty cool. Like running your RPCs over a like using browser worker and then consuming it from Atom. I'm sure that Tim had this in mind when he designed all of this, but I haven't seen it in practice yet, so it's pretty cool. So what is this thing like? It runs the recipe builder on the worker. So like when you, for example, like go to here. So this is Lloyd's stack effect site, which is pretty cool. You should check it out. It allows you to build a project setup for effect. Um, so when you like actually build the thing, where's the build button? Or is it like built every time I change something? Where's the where's the what button do I have to click to look at the workers again? Performance? No. Can you guys tell that I'm not primarily a front end developer? Here we go. So every time you change something, it like rebuilds on the worker and then sends it back. Using the web worker to resolve the file system with an in-memory one. Yeah, I mean, I think this is I don't on a quick overview of the code, I really didn't see anything wrong. The structure looked fine. We can look more closely at the actual like code itself if you want, like the logic, but the logic, I mean, the structure of the code looked fine. Where's the docs? Which docs? For the browser worker, like all the worker stuff? I can test it by selecting a target and adding modules. Okay, hang on. Add a target. Add your first target. Let's do an MCP server. Yeah, the only thing I'll say here is the style slashing is a little weird. Like you can I don't know if you can see it on my screen through the stream, but you can see like remove toolkit like briefly, like it looks like this thing like collapses briefly. Maybe debouncing this would be a good idea. With like it like having an atom debounce or something. Or something else to prevent that the layout shift. But the code itself looked perfectly fine. This is a cool little browser here. Any other questions, folks? Lloyd, you and I can chat more about this offline if you'd like. Just ping me in the thread that you started on it. But if there are no other questions, I'll probably wrap up office hours here. All right. Well, thank you all very much for attending, for hanging out, asking questions. FIWS, thank you for the unintentional prompt to talk about cluster workflow, etc. I feel like that was a stealth prompt into having a cluster stream. Can you explain Kubernetes? Yeah, sure. How much time you got? Can we do a graph office hours next week? Sebastian, you need to go touch some grass. Um, all right. Well, thank you all very much. Um, that's another 24-hour stream regarding Kubernetes. Yeah. Thank you all very much. Hope you all enjoyed office hours this week. I will see you all next week. Come armed with questions. And until then, until then,